we'll just give everybody a second to join the meeting and then we'll get started. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Chloe and I'm one of the members of the wine team at Kensington. Today, I also have my coworker Eli, who is another member of our wine team. If you haven't met him, he will also be hosting today's meeting. So once everybody gets in, we will get started. I believe we've posted the lineup in the chat, but if you, for whatever reason, have not seen the chat, we are doing the Duragouti Viognier first. So if you'd like to pour yourself a glass of that, go ahead. I know there is one group that is missing a set of those. We do apologize for that. Today was a bit of a chaotic ordeal trying to get everything organized, but we are glad that everyone could join us and is here. Yeah. Also, for opening these little vials, you have to sorry, this one's not gonna open. You have to pull the white tab off. If it doesn't come off immediately, you can use the edge of the cap to sort of lift it, if that makes sense. If you have any troubles, like a bottle opener will also help get it out. Otherwise, it's just gonna like drip into the glass, and that is not very productive. Okay.
Even a paring knife works.
Yes. Any sort of, yes, savor it. Any sort of little leverage you can get in there will help you get it out. Yes. Okay. Well, why don't we get started? I'm not going to talk too much about Duragouti Viognier because Eli is going to talk about the Duragouti wine producers themselves once we get into the reds. So if you don't already have yourself a glass poured, go ahead. We'll start off. Feel free to sniff and sip as we chat, and then we will get on our way. I hope everyone was able to pick up their little kits from Peasant as well for today. Yeah. Okay, why don't we get started? Before we get into the Viognier itself, Eli, did you want to talk about Mendoza or did you want to wait?
Yeah, I can. Let me share. Let me share this guy here. So we do have a little slideshow set up. Just short, interesting facts. This is the wrong one though. So what we're going to start with is just a brief touch on the history of some of the winemaking in Argentina, because I personally feel as though the history behind viniculture and winemaking is one of my favorite parts about wine. It's such a complex drink that there's so much history behind it, and it is really quite fascinating. So wine has actually been produced in Argentina since the Spanish settled there. Way back when, and they actually borrowed agricultural techniques from the First Nations and Native Americans down there to begin producing wine at first. They brought over a varietal called Criolla Chica, which we will actually be trying later this evening. It was the first European varietal brought over from the old world to the new world. It was mostly used at first for like ceremonial purposes in terms of like religion and stuff like that, but nowadays it is mostly just produced for table wine. Yeah, Malbec actually wasn't a huge part of winemaking in Argentina until about the 90s. Yeah, heavy influence from Spanish and Italian immigrants. So you get a lot of very similar styles to Italian and some Spanish wines. So quite interesting. And I would also like to just briefly touch on what makes Mendoza so special in terms of the terroir, or how the environment affects the grapes. Altitude is a big one. The Mendoza Valley is it's actually more so of a plateau right before the foothills to the Andes. If you look up here in this little right-hand corner, you can see these gigantic mountains and then vineyards right below them. Because of that, what that does is produces very high temps during the day, It's very dry. And then in the evenings, it cools down quite a bit. And what that does is it produces a high acidity in the wine while still making sure that there's a lot of body in the wine as well. The terroir, or sorry, the soil is another big thing. There's very little organic material, lots of sand, lots of rocks. The vines really have to struggle to produce grapes. And because they struggle, the grapes that they do produce are very concentrated. And you get very big complex wines. And then irrigation is another part where you have a lot of creeks and streams running down from the Andes Mountains, which they have essentially turned into a way to irrigate a lot of the vineyards down there. And it just makes it way easier for the winemakers to essentially have control over when they want to pick the grapes, because in a lot of other places you would need to rely heavily on the weather. But having irrigation that you can control like this makes it a lot easier. So yeah, that's just like the brief touch on Argentina history and what makes Mendoza special. Yeah, any questions or talking points or anything like that, Chloe?
No, I don't know if anybody has any questions for Eli specifically about Mendoza or the irrigation. If they want to share a little bit more about that, we can definitely go into that. Otherwise, why don't we get into the Viognier? So this is 100% Viognier, I believe 13.3%, if I am correct. Yes, yeah. 13.3%. So it is a family winemakers, and it's the two brothers. They also share property with the La Madrid family, who we will be tasting wines from in a little bit as well. So why don't we go ahead and take a sniff and a sip if you haven't already. And then I would love to hear from Eli, as well as any of you, what you think about this wine so far.
It's tasty.
It is tasty. This is one of my go-to cheap white wines in the store. I think it's fairly reasonably priced, maybe 22 on the shelf. Just easy drinking. It's not overly anything really. I think it's a good solid middle ground wine for people who don't really know what they want, or they're taking it to someone else's house and they don't know what they would like. I think this is an easy, approachable wine. If you have anything to add to that, Eli.
No, it's just beautiful. A little bit of minerality in there, a little bit of florality, just awesome citrus notes. It's something that would pair very well with like whitefish and stuff like that.
So there is a question in the chat about which cheese to pair. This isn't a cheese please tasting, so none of the cheeses are specifically tailored to the wines. I don't even know which cheeses are included actually in the kits that we all got, but you are more than welcome to try all the cheeses and then tell us what you think goes best. Unfortunately, I do not have the names of the cheese for you.
Yeah, the plate from Peasant was more so just like a little snack plate. Essentially, it was less so about pairing wines with cheese and more so just like having some very pretty cheeses to snack on while we went through these wines. So same with the meats actually, which are quite tasty.
Ooh, that's a good question. Eli, do you have an answer to that?
What was the question, sir? I think I missed that.
Are Duragudi and La Madrid two of the main wineries in Argentina?
So they are, that's a hard question to answer because specifically with Duragudi, they have won quite a few awards. They've been on quite a few lists. I think in 2010, they were on Wine Spectator's Top 100 for their, I think it was their 2005 Malbec. So they definitely know what they're doing. They definitely have experience in the Mendoza River Valley, really just around wine culture in general. So they definitely know what they're doing. I don't know if I would say they're necessarily one of like the bigger, like higher end producers. They tend to be a little bit more kind of like family and small production oriented, even though they do produce some fantastic stuff at a decent scale. They're not producing at quite the scale as some of the really high end stuff. So yeah. But yeah, it's and as for La Madrid, I'm if I'm being completely honest, I'm not totally sure. I think that they work very closely together when it comes to winemaking in general, but I don't know off the top of my head.
We did have somebody in the chat comment the darker, thicker piece of cheese. I believe that would be this one here, maybe. I'm not too sure. Yeah. Okay. Does anybody?
Honestly,
that's the one we were thinking of. That piece.
That's the one you were thinking of? Okay. Perfect.
Really good.
Does anybody have any like tasting notes or things that they'd like to say about the wine, thoughts, feelings? So one thing I do find quite interesting about this wine, and actually all of the Duragudi lineup, is that they're like fermented in concrete eggs. So we do see concrete fermentation with a few other wines that we have in the shop, but I find it really interesting that they're fermented specifically in concrete eggs. I think it's just a bit unique and different. Stone fruit, especially peaches. Yeah.
For sure, like white peaches almost.
Mm-hmm.
Just coming into them being ripe, for sure. Or even like peach flowers, peach blossoms. Just tasty. I personally feel as though the cheeses that Peasant picked out for us, they're not offensive in any way, and I think that they're going to be pairing decently well with essentially everything we drink tonight. I don't think that we should have an issue. So yes, and they're vegan, which is nice. Not a lot of people know that with some red wines and some white wines, definitely more of an old school style thing to do this, but with a lot of red wines, they'll use ox blood to filter out sediment, and they'll use egg whites to filter out sediment as well.
Or fish.
Sorry?
Or fish.
Mm-hmm.
Fish. Yep.
Yeah, not something that a lot of people really think of when they think of wine, but definitely an old school way to do it. Awesome.
And I would have to agree. I did just try a bit of the darker, thicker cheese with the wine, and I think that is a good pairing. All right. I think when we're ready, we will move on to the Fusion Abeja Blanco. And just before we do, I do have a bottle of the Viognier here, so everybody can see what the label looks like in case you were curious. We have it on the shelf, and we usually try to keep it in the fridge as well.
It's very reasonably priced. Chloe, do you remember how much it was? It's like $22 or something.
I believe it's 22. Let me double check. Why don't you pull up the presentation? I will double check for everyone quickly.
Awesome. Well, let's move on to the next one then. So we just tried that guy. So the next one we're going to try is the Duragudi Aguijón de Abeja, which means stinger of the bee in English. Essentially, that's the translation over. Their goal with this lineup that they created, we also have some of their other wines from this lineup that they do, is to kind of showcase the other winemaking regions in Argentina. A lot of people think Mendoza and like that's it. But as you can see from this map here, quite a few different regions, most of them bordering on the Andes. But if you go down to like the Rio Negro and stuff like that, that is just north of where Patagonia begins. Very, very dry, very desert-like, and is actually very famous for orchards, which is kind of interesting, with viniculture kind of coming in as a close second. But this guy here is a blend of Torrentes, Chardonnay, and Semillon. 67% Semillon, 28% Chardonnay, and 5% Torrentes. Torrentes is a grape varietal that is really only used in Argentina, out of La Rioja. Tends to be a little bit crisper, a little bit drier. It's said that it's a crossover between Criolla Chica, which is the one I was talking about earlier that the Spanish conquistadors brought over, and Muscat de Alexandra, which is actually the oldest known non-mutated grape varietal that was originally from North Africa. So it's a cross of those two, which is really, really interesting. But with the Semillon and the Chardonnay both coming forward here, it's mostly Semillon and Chardonnay. It tends to be a little bit bigger, a little bit more floral. You almost get like a little bit of like an oiliness. It's yeah, a really pretty wine that has a little bit more body on it, which is quite nice. If you were pairing this with, say, like chicken or pork, or even some lighter roasted veggies like parsnips and stuff like that, I think this wine would pair really beautifully for sure. Awesome. And yeah, I forgot to say, sorry, Torrentes is from La Rioja, and the Semillon and the Chardonnay are from the Rio Negro. And like I was saying, the Rio Negro is the farthest south wine region actually in South America, bordering just on the edges of Patagonia. So yeah, any thoughts, Chloe?
I'm going to be honest, this isn't one of my favorite wines. I'm not a big fan of Chardonnay. I can appreciate a good Chardonnay. I think for what this wine is and from where it's from, I think it's a beautiful expression. The one thing with the Duragudi fusion lineup, or the Abejas, is they kind of vary year to year. So not every year they do the same grapes. And I think there's some expressions of theirs that are better than others. Yes, I try to love this wine. I think it's a great price. I think it's great for what it is, but it's not my style of wine. I think it's better with cheese and meat, though.
I was gonna say it definitely almost needs like a partner.
Yes, it does.
Not a fan of like bigger whites. I'm not totally sure. This almost looks like prosciutto, but I'm not totally sure. This guy here is not the one that is cut in rounds, but the one that is cut in like almost rectangles. Other one.
This one?
That one, yeah.
Yes. That one for.
So I find that one, because it has quite a bit of fat in it, and you're getting quite a bit of nuttiness, that the wine also pairs well with that, because it has a little bit of body to kind of back that up.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's better with that one.
Might be a better. Yeah, and that's a good call. Yeah, I think you're right. Actually, I'll be honest. Cheese and meats are not my forte, as much as I love them.
Yes, we leave that to our friends next door at Peasant. They will always be there for your needs and to help you select wines. I'm just going to paste the link in the chat, as well as the price for anybody who was wondering. Does anyone have any tasting notes they'd like to add or comments? I know we had a few in the chat. Oh, I should mention Evan, our manager. He is also sitting in on the call. Unfortunately, he is not feeling well, but he is here to provide commentary via the chat.
He's got the Rona. So.
Oh, I wasn't sure if he wanted us to share that.
Oh, sorry.
What makes the wine fuller bodied?
Makes the wine fuller bodied, yeah. So like I was saying earlier, with Mendoza in particular, because of how hot it can get during the day, when grapes are ripened in a region that gets quite hot, it will actually you'll kind of develop the ripeness a lot quicker, whereas cooler regions, say like very classically in France, like up in Champagne, which is actually decently to the north, they're able to get that such high acidity on it because it tends to be a little bit cooler than some of the regions farther south. And that is just due to the evenings being cooler as well as the days being a little bit cooler as well. So it takes the grapes just a touch longer to ripen. And you can kind of control when you want to pick them as well. Another thing that will add to body is the grape varietal. So Semillon is classically a little bit more fuller bodied. Roussan's a little bit more fuller bodied classically. Chardonnay, depending on where you're getting it from, can be gigantic, say if you're getting it from like California. But it really just comes down to the farmers and what they're doing and what the winemaker wants to do, because you can oak white wines as well, or just wines in general that will add body to them. With almost all red wines, you're going to see a process called malolactic conversion, where they will use bacteria that is present in oak barrels to essentially convert malic acid to lactic acid, which will make that acid act softer and almost more buttery. So that's another way you can add body to wines without without having essentially the winemaker has complete control over that versus whether the farmer is picking them at certain times of the year or not. So yeah, totally fair, Margaret.
Yeah, that is fair. It is meant to be a bigger, fuller bodied expression of a white wine. So it's not everybody's style, but there are definitely people out there who enjoy those wines. Yeah, I think if everyone is ready, we will move on to the Criolla. So that is the Conclertes sample vial. And this was the red, the very, very light red. If you have been in before for Argentinian wines, we probably recommended this to you. Eli and I both love this wine a lot. We actually fought over who was going to talk about it. Unfortunately, he has won that fight, so he will be talking about it. I don't know if everybody did chill just their entire packs or just the whites, but I also recommend chilling this guy down a little bit. Not quite as much as you chill down a white wine, but it is something that you can have with a little bit of a chill on it because it is a very light, pretty red. And yeah, anyways, Eli, you can take over now.
Sure. Yeah, Louise, you're totally right. This is a very, very light red, almost verging on rosé. Because of that, it takes to a slight chill super well. Like if you were to come in and ask for a bottle of this, I would normally suggest like sticking in the fridge for like 30, 45 minutes before you open it. Just adds like a crispness, a freshness that really complements the wine quite well. And most expensive as in it's $28. It's not, it's $1 more expensive than the last one, Evan. But yeah, we do have, so why is it so light? So the lightness would come just due to, so the winemaker's decision making, essentially. So they decided with this grape varietal specifically, this grape varietal is Criolla Chica, which again was that first grape varietal that was brought over from Europe over to South America with the colonialist and stuff like that when the Spanish first landed there. Like I was saying, first used for religious purposes and all that stuff. With this guy's here, this is from a region called Las Compuertas, which is literally right on the brink of the Andes Mountains. It's right where the Mendoza River comes out of this huge canyon. Right on the brink. It's quite cold there. Again, when $29. Sorry, Evan. It's quite cold there, relatively. So when you have a region that is that much cooler, you end up getting wines that have an increased acidity. Oftentimes they'll have thinner skins. Yeah, it's just a beautiful, fresh, like, it's just a wonderful one. I just can't get over how tasty it is. Especially on like on a hot day, like stick this in a bucket of ice on your patio and just like there, it's very easy to kill a bottle. So
this is what I recommend to people who do not like white wine. Actually, it's funny, Evan says patio crusher in the chat because I did a tasting last summer that was patio crushers, and we included this wine, or I included this wine because I love it so much. It's easy drinking, not too overpowering, but it still gives you that nice red wine quality that you want, but it's not overpowering in any way. And you can actually have this with seafood dishes, which lots of people think that you can't have red wine with seafood. That's incorrect. You can. There are just very few that it works well with. Does anybody have any tasting notes they'd like to add? I know we've got some in the chat, but feel free to unmute yourself and speak up. Seems to work with sweet, bitter, salty. Yes, I agree. You can pair it with a variety of things.
Would you guys recommend drinking this one within the year, or is it okay to cellar it for a bit?
It's definitely a cheap and cheerful sort of red, where it's not something you would really want to set in the cellar. With wines that normally you would want to cellar, normally you'd see a little bit more tannin, a little bit more body on it. It does have quite a pretty acidity. I don't think it would decline necessarily from like say a year or two, but anything longer than that. And I personally don't feel as though it would add quite as much to it, just because it is meant to be so like light and pretty and kind of delicate. So yeah,
I would agree with that. I think if you're looking to cellar something, you'd maybe want to be looking more towards something like a Malbec that's got a bit more body to hold up to. The Duraguti line, the Compuertas line, they do make a Malbec, or we had two. Do we have both still, Eli, or did we sell out of the one?
Yeah. So
the 1914 and then the Cinco Suelos.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, the Compuerta, like Las Compuertas, that region is actually quite interesting. It has some of the oldest Malbec vines in the world, some of them reaching over 100 years old. One of the wines that we do have in the store, one of the ones that Chloe just mentioned, actually, the 1914 Malbec, those vines were planted in 1914. So they're over 100 years old. The grapes that they do produce are very concentrated. They produce very little of it because when vines get that old, they end up producing very little fruit. But the fruit that they do produce is very concentrated. And then the fact that Duraguti, with a lot of their wines, they actually ferment and age in concrete eggs, like I was saying, or like Chloe was saying, sorry. It just keeps the essence of those grapes very, very well. And you're not losing a lot of that to like some oak or other sort of winemaking tactics that you would see. It's a very pure of like a high quality Malbec, which is really quite interesting. So yeah, I could drink this wine all night. So
Yes, and you have definitely drank that wine all night.
well, we've me and you have crushed a bottle within what, like half hour, 45 minutes before. So
I'm not sure that it would be very professional to share how many bottles of this we have crushed.
yeah, pre or beginning of World War I. Yeah, it's some of those vines get crazy old. Expect like specifically in Las Compuertas, because that was one of the first regions that was settled for agriculture. Just because it was like right at the, essentially not the mouth of the Mendoza River, but essentially where it comes out of that canyon, opens up, allows for very easy irrigation to all the different vines and stuff like that. So, but yeah, just a really interesting line of wines from a very interesting producer. So, oh, and I have the bottle. Sorry.
Yeah, show the bottle off. Beautiful wax top. If you
Yeah,
ever
has a
struggle with the wax tops, an easy trick is to just cut right up from the bottom of the wax to the top of the wax, so that you cut it in half and then just split it off. Because I know some people do have questions about that occasionally.
Oh, and I forgot to show the fusion.
Blowtorch also works. Actually, Evan, a blowtorch is not a good idea. Speaking from experience, don't heat the wax up, because it might make the cork protrude, and it might just leave a waxy mess on your table. So
when did you try that?
hole punch in the other end. That's at your own risk.
Hole punch the other end, like shotgun it?
Eli could tell you all about that, I'm sure.
Shotgunning a glass bottle of wine. That'd be
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, it's a challenge now. You've been challenged. All right. I think if everyone is ready, we'll move on to the La Madrid Malbec. So that is this guy here, the Malbec Classic. This is just, again, a cheap and cheerful bottle of wine, $24.99. I don't have too much to say about it. It is made in the same area as the Duraguti lineup. It's actually made with the Duraguti brothers, and then I believe his name is, just a second, everyone, Guillermo Garcia La Madrid. So he has been running the La Madrid winery, so the La Madrid side of things, and then Hector Duraguti, which is one of the Duraguti brothers that Eli was talking about, is the master winemaker for him. So they have been making wines now for quite some time, and this is just, it's our staple Malbec at the store. I know lots of people who just enjoy this Malbec when they want a nice cheap bottle of Malbec, because not all Malbecs are overly exciting, and that's okay. But when you want a nice glass of Malbec, I think this one is nice, easy drinking. Yeah, does anyone have any like notes right off the bat? Things they'd like to add or say? Eli, do you have anything? Sorry.
Yeah, this guy tends to definitely drink on the bigger side, especially after drinking the Criolla. Yeah, I mean, like super deep violet, just lots of like cooked, like stewed plums, cooked blackberries. Chloe, do you know if there's oak on this guy?
I think there is a touch of oak. From when I did the write-ups on them in the fall, I believe I can double check, but I think there's just a touch of oak. Not overly oaky, but you do definitely pick that up on the nose a little bit, and then just a touch on the palate. Not as much as some other Malbecs I've had.
For sure.
And this is the La Madrid single vineyard lineup. So one vineyard, clay. That's a good note, actually, Louise. I did pick that up a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, great note.
And somebody said not as earthy as they would have expected it to be. That's fair. I don't know if you would like to share, Elena, what you would typically expect in a Malbec. But feel free to speak up at any point. All of you are welcome to participate and speak with your mics on.
I was expecting a little bit bolder, earthier Malbec compared to some of the other Argentinian Malbecs that we have tried in the past. I know when we did your Malbec tasting, I think it was last year, you had a French Malbec that was really flowery and light, and that was the first Malbec that I'd had that was not kind of that really, like, I don't want to say intense, but more robust kind of profile. And I think this one kind of sits somewhere in between what I'm used to and that French wine.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Eli, didn't you sit in on that tasting?
I didn't, but I know which wine you're talking about, the Cahors.
Mm-hmm.
And with that being from that region in France, they, like you said, actually with that Malbec tasting, that Malbec specifically was made with a process called carbonic maceration. I know which, I'm pretty sure I remember which one you're talking about. It had a bunch of
the one with
faces,
the pink label?
pink label with like a bunch of masks or faces on it.
Yeah, it's like a funky label that's kind of pink. And
yeah,
they had a Spanish Malbec as well, that we had to go back and get a second bottle because ours was corked. Tasted much better on the second tasting.
Oh, I do remember you coming back in for the second bottle. That's actually one of my favorite Malbecs. That's from Alto Landon.
Yeah, that was
fantastic female
really
producer. Yeah, hopefully we'll get some more of that soon.
I think we still have it in the basement somewhere.
Nice.
Yeah, the one you're talking about from France, though, that one was quite interesting because they use a process that is normally, that guy. That's normally kind of reserved for Gamay in Beaujolais, where they use a process called semi-carbonic maceration, where they will actually let the grapes essentially crush themselves in the tanks. The grapes that are on top will ferment inside the skins. Once they burst at about 2 to 3%, they will again press off the entirety of the wine and then proceed as normal in the winemaking process. Yeah, there's the Alto Landon as well. But the one from France, it's when you do that, you get lots of like floral notes, almost like sour cherry candy, a little bit like cherry kirsch. You can even begin getting into like tropical fruits like banana, which is really interesting and like very classical Gamay. But yeah, that Malbec I remember was very, very interesting, and I quite enjoyed that. It's very different than what you'd normally see. This guy here, though, the one from La Madrid, is very well balanced. Yeah, just again, one of those ones that's very easy to drink. Could pair well with bigger red meats, can pair well with some lighter meats as well, or just even like roasted veggies or some salads and stuff like that. Just a great kind of all around sort of table wine. A good one just to kind of keep in if you have a cellar, your cellar. If you have a fridge, your fridge. If it's just on your countertop, just on your countertop. It's just a good wine to have around. So.
Yes, I would agree. Actually, my biggest struggle with my mom in particular is that she loves Malbec, and I find some Malbecs they're too much for me. They're a little too overpowering. So a Malbec like this, that's nice, light, it can pair well with dinner, but it satisfies kind of both of our like palates, I guess you could say. It's just nice to have, and it's $24.99, so really affordable.
Awesome.
Okay, cool.
Are we done with that guy?
Yes, well, when we are ready, we can move on to the Bernarda.
Sweet.
So the next wine we're doing is the Duraguti Bernarda. Eli has the bottle with him, so he can hold that up for you guys.
This is the bottle.
Oh.
It looks very similar to the Viognier, but just with yellow writing, and it's a red wine. So awesome.
Yes, and Evan has pulled up some stuff on Duraguti. And so our website, well, our new website, sorry, is still a bit of a work in progress. We're hoping for all of our wineries, especially the exclusive ones, that we're going to be able to have winery profiles like this going forward, so that you guys can learn a little bit about the wines if you want to look at them online. Otherwise, come in and see us in the store. We will do our best to talk to you about them. Yeah, great tool on the new website that we have there.
Awesome. So this one in particular is made from grapes harvested from two regions in Mendoza, two subregions. One of them is called Agrolo. It's split down the middle 50-50. Agrolo is kind of world renowned for producing very high quality, very complex sort of reds, just because of how bone dry it is there and how desolate the soil is. And this might actually be kind of coming around back to Louise's comment about clay, where there's a layer of clay very like decently deep in the soil that will retain water. And that's one of really the only ways that these vines are able to survive in such desolate areas. Jen, yes, all of the Duraguti wines are vegan. Yeah, so 50% of this is from Agrolo. And then the other 50 is from an area called Rivadavia, which is one of the easternmost regions in Mendoza. So like really beginning to go out into like the flatter sort of more prairie sort of looking areas. It's one of the largest subregions in Mendoza with about 15,000 hectares of space, and also very well known for producing like big full-bodied reds. With this wine in particular, it spends, after fermentation, initial fermentation, it spends 4 months in fourth use 600-liter French barriques. So they're using French oak that's been used already. So just very, very light touch of oak. And then it actually spends 4 months in just concrete pools where it will sit and kind of just mingle with the yeast and the different bacteria that's in the air before being filtered and bottled, of course. Adam, yes, violets, absolutely.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, this guy's just, it's very, very pretty. Again, one of those ones that would, I personally enjoy this a little bit more than the La Madrid Malbec.
I would have to agree. I enjoy this more than the La Madrid Malbec. There's just that the mouthfeel to me. That's what gets me. Like, yes, the dried fruit, I bet. I haven't tried any. I guess I'll try some right.
It just has a little bit more acidity on it. It kind of holds up some of the fruit notes a little bit better, as well as pushing those floral notes to the forefront of the palate and the nose. I mean, it's a beautiful red.
And I will go grab the link on this one for everyone really quickly. And this one actually, I think, might be the most affordable of the evening. It is $22.99, so definitely the most affordable red of the evening.
Anybody else have some notes or pairings that they feel like they'd share? Any pairings that they think they might try with this later? Like say you wanted to make like a big pot of stew or some nice steaks or something like that. Anything somebody's looking at? Maybe.
Yes, thank you, Evan. It is the same grape as the Comportus Charbono.
Yeah. Yes.
Balsamic glaze on juice beef of some kind. That does sound really good. Some game meat.
Some like, oh, actually, now you have me hankering for like moose or something like that. Like a good moose tenderloin. Oh my God, with this, that'd be fantastic, actually.
Exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. And Alana, yeah, the balsamic sweet glaze on just, yeah, absolutely. Having that kiss of sweetness, that kiss of florality to kind of complement the wine really well.
Yeah,
That's
sorry, I
amazing.
can't spell. It was supposed to be juicy beef, like some kind of like really moist roast or something.
I figured as much. It's okay. I'm like the same when it comes to, oh, I got to get the message on there really quickly.
Roast duck. Hell yeah. That sounds awesome.
Ooh.
Roast duck with like a little bit of like a cranberry compote or something like that.
Yes, because that
An
would tie
orange.
in like those dried berries that we have in the snack pack. I think that somebody commented went well with this, or maybe that was the last one. I think they go well with this one as well.
Nice.
Okay. We'll let everyone enjoy that for a second before we move on to the final wine of the evening. And then we'll kind of go back and give everyone a chance to taste over things if you still have some wine left, to decide what your favorite was of the evening. So the last wine we are trying tonight is the La Madrid Cabernet Reserva. So they do have a wine, or a Cabernet, sorry, that is the same price as the Malbec. This is meant to be the Reserva version. So just a little bit more elevated, a little bit more complex than the regular cab. And I believe this one is like $26.99 if I'm correct. I actually haven't had the wine before. Oh, Evan just corrected me. It is 27. I really enjoyed it in previous vintages. Yes, so I have poured this for myself. So if you haven't already, go ahead and pour yourself a little sample and we'll give it a taste. This is made by, as I mentioned earlier, Guillermo, and then one of the Duraguti brothers. So. We did decide to put this wine at the end just because it does have a bit more body that stands behind it. So we wanted to make sure it didn't overpower anything that we had going on. I think this is a nice expression of cab because it's not overly juicy. And I think there's definitely a lot of people who really appreciate that juiciness of like a Californian cab. But I kind of like how there's that nice dry finish on this one. I don't know if Eli has anything that he'd like to say to that. I know he maybe isn't the biggest fan of cabs. Smoothest one of the night. Yes, it is very smooth.
It's not that I'm not a fan of cabs. I can't drink a whole bottle. Gives me a headache.
That's not true. You drink it even if it gave you the headache.
This guy with I'm pretty sure it's a cheddar. God, we should have asked Adam for the cheese list.
We should have.
One stronger cheese that doesn't quite have a rind on it. That with this wine, and even a little bit of either of the game meat or either of the
This
meat.
one, Eli?
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Either of the meats is just
Not a fan of the apricot paired. Yes. Does that mean that Kurt got you a cheese kit? Because he made a comment that I was like, oh, you should go next door and see if they'll make her up a kit really quick. And he was like, oh, no, she doesn't need one. So I'm glad he decided to get you one after all.
He brought us two because our 18-year-old daughter is doing her first tasting ever.
Oh, that's great. I'm so glad you're on the call. I remember being 18 and being thrown into tastings. That's kind of how I learned. So I hope you're enjoying the wine so far. Do you have a favorite as an 18-year-old?
fresh palate.
The sixth one. So this one now.
This one. Cool. Actually, that makes a lot of sense. Eli and I talked about this when we were both 18 and getting into wine. Both of us really loved like Spanish reds. And I think this is really resemblant of a Spanish red in that it's got that dry finish. It's not overly in your face in any sort of way.
Got a little bit of spice in it.
Yeah, it's interesting and it's fun and it's not too much of anything. So I think that's a really interesting answer, actually. Get the
That's
chat.
a great lineup. I personally enjoyed every single one we tried tonight.
Right on to Ardbeg next, Bella. So Bella, if you don't know, when I turned 18, literally the next month was like Ardbeg Day or whatever, and my dad dragged me out to the tasting and was like, it's your turn to like whiskey now, because his approach was throw her off the deep end and she will learn to swim. Unfortunately, he was right. I do love my Ardbeg whiskey and my peated whiskey, but I hope your dad isn't like pushing the whiskey on you too hard yet, because otherwise you might be like me.
That's been like kind of like honed in on since they were wee babies and stuff. But I think his fear is though, or I keep saying to him, he doesn't want us to like it because then we will drink the good stuff and then he won't have any left.
I was gonna say
my father keeps the good stuff in my room, and I'm still like, why did you get me into this? Like it's literally all in my bedroom in like the closet.
Like it's just a bad idea.
Evan, isn't your daughter like 9?
Yeah, she's got time. It's not gonna happen.
I hope this isn't like a stardom young kind of comment that you're trying to make here.
Whiskey on the gums never hurt anybody. It's fine.
Good luck, Isla. That's all I have to say.
She's named after Isla whiskeys. What can you say?
Yeah, I guess that's a fair point. Yeah. Does anyone have any thoughts that they'd like to share about this last wine, or any questions before we send out the poll and let you guys vote? I will also open this time up for you guys to go back to any of the other wines that we tried tonight if you have any questions about those, or you wanted to go back and taste them and then ask us questions. Just let us know. But otherwise I will get the poll set up, and then I'll leave it up for a few minutes so everybody can vote on their favorite wine of the evening. Maybe Eli, since this is your first tasting, you'd like to share a little bit about yourself so that customers can get to know you a little bit better, since this is like your first official time co-hosting.
Yeah, for sure. So my name's Eli. I grew up in Canmore. Skiing, being outdoorsy, kayaking, all that fun stuff. Worked in kitchens since I was 13. Went to culinary school out here. Decided that was too stressful. Didn't want to do that anymore. Switched over to, well, while I was at culinary school, a teacher recommended taking my WSET 1, which is like an intro to wine sort of course, because I was kind of expressing being curious in that. Took that, absolutely loved it, jumped in the deep end. Now I'm working here with Chloe and just kind of flying by the seat of my pants and hoping for the best, but enjoying every single moment of it because I get to drink wine with my friends and coworkers and just hang out. So it's yeah, it's good.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's good. I have done quite a few tastings now, and I have been around the shop quite literally since I was a small child. So if you don't know me, my name is Chloe. And Eli and I are kind of sharing some wine responsibilities at the moment, but we are around at the store all the time. So if you ever have any questions, one of us is most likely there. I believe Evan put our emails in the chat earlier. So if you wanted to order any of the wines from tonight, they will be 15% off. Yeah, both of us are there most of the time. I don't have my formal WSET education, but I have been working in the industry now since I was 18. For those of you who don't know, my dad is Andrew Ferguson and he is the owner. So I do get pushed around a little bit from that. And I've done some work on the whiskey side of things. Before COVID, I did do some pouring for a whiskey rep and had a little bit more knowledge there. But more recently, I've kind of shifted into the wine side of things. And yeah, we are in a period of transition right now on the wine side. So please bear with us. We are trying our best. I believe we've started sharing the results now. So
That's interesting.
it looks like the cab has won. That is interesting. That's not the one I expected to win.
I expect the Criolla to win.
Yeah, but that's because you and I are biased because we both love that wine. Awesome. That's great though. I love to see that. We do have some wines that are also very similar to the La Madrid cab that we just got in. They're actually from Chile. So if you really enjoyed the La Madrid Cabernet Reserva, we have some ones from Chile that are exclusive to us, the Seagull wines, and those ones are going to be around the same price point. So if you want to explore other options that are going to be similar in style, profile, and winemaking profile, then let us know. What did Evan say?
That's a fair point, Evan.
Oh, and it looks like my yes. Evan, we don't purchase it anymore. I don't even. So we have some new staff recently, and the one is getting into red wines, and she asked me for a recommendation, and I said, oh, try this Criolla. It's really fantastic. Dad, can you please leave the meeting? And anyways, so what was once my staff pick, the Duragudi Criolla, is now Rachel's staff pick, because I was like, well, if you love it so much, like, you can put your name on it. I have my name on a lot of bottles at the store, so feel free to take over the staff pick for me. But yes, it is that we have lots on the shelf. Evan does not need to concern anybody about that. We have plenty in stock.
Any final comments from anybody?
Yeah, I'd really like to know, now that Andrew's on, why he keeps all of his expensive whiskey in a closed bedroom.
Good
Dad,
question.
do you care to comment on that?
I kind of need to know the context behind the question. Are you talking about the whiskey nook in yours / Alan Shirley's bedroom in the basement?
It's okay. it was my bedroom.
Well, I mean, you could be there, but you've chosen to stay at your grandparents' house, so that's
maybe
all.
maybe it's just because there's too much whiskey in my bedroom. Like there's too many bottles.
Well, no comment there, Adam. I like where your head's at on that question, but no. And for anyone who's concerned, we've got plenty of Criolla. We got a warehouse full of Argentinian wine, so we're well stocked. The staff couldn't drink their way through it if they wanted to.
That's not true.
We should have included a dirty laundry bottle in this tasting, since that's what we're airing now.
Yeah, well, inadvertently. But
No.
I think it's great that Kurt, who just finished hosting a whiskey tasting, is also now joined this wine tasting. And
that's not a glass of wine.
No, it's not.
Come
It
on.
looks like wine though. So, but I know I want to say good job and thank you to you and Eli for doing the tasting. As Chloe made the note, like we are in a period of transition. We've got some great new people, including a young man who's just moved out from Toronto who ran a bunch of wine bars that turned into a wine retailer during COVID. So Ethan will be joining us over the weeks ahead and I think bolstering our team. So yeah, it's business. Things happen like this, but we still got a great team. A lot of people who've been there for 12 to 14 years. So yeah, things are looking bright. Got some cool changes coming, and eventually we're going to have a reconstructed new entrance. So
Yes. And before you take over too much, Dad, I would also like to ask everyone who's participated tonight if they have any ideas for tastings that they'd like to see us do. We don't really have much of a schedule up for wine for the next couple of months because we weren't really sure what would be happening in terms of if we would continue virtually or continue in person. We actually sold quite a few more seats for this tasting than we expected to. We added seats twice. So that was really great because I was really worried we weren't going to sell tickets for this or that they might be refunded. But if there's anybody who is like loving these virtual tastings where you get the little kit from Peasant and the little sample bottles, we would be more than happy to continue those. Due to both the accident at the store and then also because of COVID, our tasting room is not functional at the moment. But maybe my dad can speak to that and when we plan to get back to in person.
yeah, I'll make a quick comment and then I'm going to sign out because I didn't intend to come in and take any thunder. But yeah, as Chloe said, we had thoughts of possibly rolling out some in-person tastings after Easter. And then February 11th, someone decided to put a Dodge Ram through our business, which seems like it wouldn't be such a big deal. But the problem is we've only just got sign off like 2 days ago by the insurance company on the restoration. So it hasn't even started. The carpeting needs to be replaced. And a lot of the moving pieces mean we don't know what space we're going to have when. So we're doing our best to try to build a path towards bringing back some in-person events in store. Evan teased in the chat that we're going to do a wine festival in May as part of our birthday celebration. We might be able to do a handful of other in-person sit-down events in store between now and the fall, but our hope is that by the fall, we will have a more typical pre-COVID tasting schedule in shop, including in-store events. But, and this is going to be the case on the whiskey side, a lot of our events will remain virtual and online because there's benefits to not having to drive somewhere, catch a cab or an Uber. So there may be a mix of things, and that may include some wine events too. So that's still to be determined. We'll figure it out. But we are trying to get back to normal. And that means if you come in on a Friday, Saturday, we've got bottles of wine open for tasting again. So, you know, we encourage people to pop in and see Chloe and Eli and Rachel and some of the other members of the team and try the wines that we're featuring that we have open. And as soon as we're able, we will be welcoming people back in store for in-person tastings. So stay tuned.
Thank you. Oh, no, sorry, Jen, that comment is not welcome in a wine tasting.
Chloe, you just got to roll with it. You just got to roll with it.
No.
No, a little dram before bed.
So yes, we do have bottles
Did
open.
I tell you
every
that Chris is
weekend.
here? It's not just me, it's him.
Okay, now we understand. So we do have bottles open for our weekend features every weekend. This weekend it is Chateau Le Grand Verdu, which is a Bordeaux producer from France. So we have, I don't know if Sean ended up opening up the rosé and the reserve white after I left this afternoon, but those two should be open. And then I believe tomorrow we're going to open the reserve red and maybe the regular red. Next weekend, I think is Tedeschi or
Tedeschi. It's kind of a
Evan.
Like a
Dad, you can go now. Evan, do you have the?
Yeah, I believe it's going to be Easter picks next week.
Oh,
which
right.
we'll have to
Yes.
talk about.
So we are doing staff picks for Easter weekend next weekend. So those ones will be open. So whatever the staff picks are, we will have a couple bottles open there. I am sure that one of my bottles will probably be a Brunello. So
There you go.
interest anybody.
Well, I'm going to tune out. If there's other questions, Chloe and Eli are more than capable of answering them, but thanks for taking part in the
Yes.
tasting tonight. Good job, guys. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.